Very much, Ivan. Right. We're just about to jump into another session, another great one. I had a chat with Edward last week, and oh my word, we just connected, and so much great truth that I got in that moment from his story. And trust me, you are ready again. Just get ready to be pumped, to be inspired, and to just leave a different kind of person at the end of this gig. So please just do a round of applause. So how do we do this? Huh? This is your moment now, Edward. We invite you to please take the stage.
Thank you, Kelvin. And wow, haven't Kelvin and Elizabeth set the bar high, which is really good because I'm not very good at limbo. So the bar is so high, I can just walk under it. I've been going to the Wisdoms 1, 2, 3 chats in the mornings. It's now 6 o'clock our time because of the time difference. And I found them fantastic. So it's really good to be here with Kelvin and with Wisdoms 1, 2, 3. And I want to tell you about being unstoppable. Because of my ultra running exploits, and particularly because of my adventures in multi-day races, I'm known for being unstoppable. In one of those events, the Kalahari Akrabi's Extreme Marathon in South Africa, where you run 250 kilometers in 6 stages over 7 days, carrying all your own food and equipment in 40-degree heat, I'm known as the Kalahari Bulldozer, because bulldozers symbolize being unstoppable. And one year they presented me with a toy bulldozer just to sort of make the point. Now, Oprah Winfrey says running is a metaphor for life, because you get the more you put in, the more you get out. Well, I think multi-day races are a metaphor for a successful business life. And I'm going to share with you the lessons I've learned from my experiences, particularly from tough running events, about becoming unstoppable. In a marathon, or indeed an ultra marathon like the iconic 56 miles Comrades Marathon in South Africa, you can collapse over the finish line totally exhausted, as many people do, and that is considered a good result. That won't work in a multi-day event. You have to be able to finish every day in a condition that means you'll be able to continue the next day. And that's the same in business. You don't want to be a one-hit wonder. You need to keep overcoming challenges and keep delivering. For that, you need to take care of yourself. Keep yourself in top condition so you're unstoppable in the long run. You'll also need to evolve because the conditions and the challenges change. I'm an expert in one specialist area, me. I'm not an expert in you, although if I were your coach, I'd get to know you well so I could adapt my advice to your circumstances. What works for me might not necessarily work for you. We are all an experiment of one. So whatever you hear or read, you'll have to adapt it for your circumstances. And we're all unstoppable in different ways. Compare my rugby career to Brian Habana's, a bit chalk and cheese. He played in the Springboks team that defeated England in the final of the 2007 Rugby World Cup. On the day he was doing that, I was taking part in the first of my 12 Kalahari Akrabi's Extreme Marathon runs. Now, I played schoolboy rugby when I was 13, and I struggled to stay in the B team. My saving grace was that because I was very big as a 13-year-old, I was useful in a set piece near the try line. I would be passed the ball so I could barge across the line. All I had to do was not lose my grip on the ball as people were bouncing off me and being bounced out of the way. I was unstoppable. Habana was unstoppable in another way, often carrying the ball the whole length of the pitch as a result of some neat swerves or a little chip and gather and an incredible turn of speed. He had a 100-meter time of 10.4 seconds. So both of us unstoppable, but in different ways. Fortunately, even though we're all different, There are some general principles that apply to success in both running and in business, although there's no universal truth, except perhaps one: we're all going to die. Now, I've learned a lot from studying other runners and talking to other runners, and we can discover business principles by observing successful people. With a note of caution, the loudest voices are often not the best ones to listen to. There are many successful people you've never heard of. How many of the chief executives of the FTSE 100 companies could you name? Companies like Unilever, AstraZeneca, HSBC, Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems. We don't know who they are. Now, Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the books that Elizabeth read. And that has stood the test of time, 25 million copies. So although you're an experiment of one, there are some guidelines you can follow. And there are plenty of other books on the subject and lots of stuff on the internet, some of it very dubious. Now, before giving my thoughts on guidelines, I thought I'd just say a word on coaches, because they've been mentioned already once. When I started running, non-elite athletes didn't have any coaches. Now they're common and personal trainers are everywhere. And it's the same thing with business coaches and life coaches. If you're going to use a coach, and I think they can be valuable, choose carefully. You want one who will understand you, respect your values, and act with integrity. And that's something that Elizabeth talked about, integrity. Integrity is key. And it's the same when you're reading books and articles. And it's how you tell the good from the bad. When I was preparing this talk, I had a look to see what was available on the internet. I didn't want to waste your time saying things that could be easily found with a search, how do I become unstoppable? And interestingly enough, a lot of what I found told you what you should do. For example, have a winning mindset, but not how to do it. If I knew how to have a winning mindset, I wouldn't be searching for one. So telling me to have one without telling me how is pointless. So was the advice: be unstoppable. You should never stop. Never quit and never give up. It didn't tell you how to do that. And also, I think that's wrong advice. And I hope I'm going to give you some practical things that you can do to become unstoppable. One article quoted Nietzsche, and this is the bit that made me think about integrity. The quote was, "He who has a why to live for can bear any how." Now, the actual quote is, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." And I think to misquote something shows a lack of integrity or a lack of knowledge or sloppiness, and possibly all of them. You know, if the quote doesn't quite fit your point, say so. Nietzsche said this, I think it would be more appropriate to say that. So you dig behind what people are saying. Are they telling you the truth in those articles? And I'll come back to that Nietzsche quote later on. So a little bit more about adapting what you hear and read. If you're following a marathon training plan from a book and it was in kilometers, you might have to convert it to miles. And if you're speedy, you might drop the speed sessions and add in more endurance runs. Conversely, if you had in good endurance but were slow, you'd reduce the endurance runs and put in more effort into speed work. I hate speed work, and it kind of shows, really. Now, there's some quite simple adjustments to running. Business is a lot more complicated. You're going to have to think a lot harder about the conversions and the adaptations. However, if you stick to the principles and your values, you will figure it out. It'd be wise, before talking about the practical stuff to help you become unstoppable, to consider whether unstoppable is a good thing. Personally, I don't think it always is. If you're pursuing a course of action that will destroy you, being unstoppable is not a good idea. It's definitely not a good idea. If you're going backwards, being unstoppable is not a good idea. So, as with most things, context is paramount. Unstoppable going in the right direction is a good thing. Unstoppable heading for a cliff is a bad thing. For this talk, I'm referring to good unstoppable. Unfortunately, often the good is only seen by people once you've got there. As George, can't even say the word, as George Bernard Shaw said, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. That's a quote I learned from Trevor. But there's a way to prevent people from thinking you're being unreasonable and constantly holding you back. And a friend of mine, Mimi Anderson, who is definitely unstoppable, she has achieved a staggering number of running successes and set multiple Guinness World Records, won the 7-day treadmill record she set with a broken bone in her foot. Now, she talks about two types of people, drains and radiators. Drains tend to have a negative outlook. They're the sort of people who drain your energy levels, constantly doubt what you're trying to do is achievable. They think you're being unreasonable. Radiators bring enthusiasm into our lives. They're positive. They're genuinely interested in others. They support your ambitions and make you feel good about yourself. Radiators bring out the best in people. So the first step in becoming unstoppable is to surround yourself with people who reflect who you want to be and how you want to feel, energized and positive. And I'm sure that's something that Kelvin's tapped into, because I've never seen so much energy. Now, in a small way, I feel I've balanced things out with Mimi. She uses a photograph of my frostbitten leg in her talks when she illustrates how tough the 6633 Ultra in the Arctic is. It's an event she's won. And now I've used one of her sayings in a talk, we're beginning to even up. Although I'll always be in her debt for the advice she gave me before my first multi-day event, the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert. Mimi is most definitely a radiator. So remember, to become unstoppable, clear out the drains. Long before I started running, and a long time before trailrunningman was born, I was a chartered accountant. Getting there required unstoppability. When I left school, jobs were easy to come by, and I enjoyed a life of sex and drugs and rock and roll. Without the drugs, and soul music was more my thing. And it was a case of summertime and living is easy. And in the winter, I'd work. Then one summer, I met the woman of my dreams, and all that came to an end. I needed to be accepted by her family and have a decent career. So I set out to be a chartered accountant. And that wasn't easy. I was 28, didn't have the entry requirements. Most people start as graduates. I didn't have a degree. However, in those days, there was another route, a 9-month foundation course and an extra year under a training contract. The only problem was I didn't have the money to pay for the course. And I didn't have any money to keep myself while studying. So the solution was to borrow it. Now, my bank was of no help. They'd lend me money to buy a car, but borrowing for a course was an alien concept to them. How times have changed since then with student loans and things like that. So I approached every bank in town. And the very last one I had on the list, Williams and Glyn's, a posh people's bank, that's why it was last on the list, said yes. Their rationale being that I would feel good about them, so stay with them. And once I qualify as a chartered accountant, I'd be earning well, so be a good customer. Plus, I'd recommend them to my clients. And that's exactly what happened. So a win-win situation then. So there's another lesson in becoming unstoppable. Keep trying until you succeed and don't rule any options out. I could have quite easily ruled out Williams and Glyn's because it was a posh people's bank. Then finding a training contract to move on to after the course was another example of trying and not ruling things out. I wanted a firm close to where I lived, but that wasn't possible. So I had to go to a London firm. All I had to do then was pass the exam at the end of the course. Then life threw me a curveball. About 3 days before the exam, I felt dreadful and couldn't get out of bed. I was diagnosed with German measles, no exam for me. Now, my accountancy firm wanted to defer my joining them until the following year. But I didn't want that. I didn't want to waste a year, and I was worried I'd lose my resolve, lose my determination. So I persuaded them to take me on the proviso that if I failed the exam, I'd lose my job. And the problem with that was I had to move from Cambridge to London. I had to persuade the woman of my dreams to give up her current job and move to London with me, with no guarantee that it would work. That was a pressure exam when I sat it, and I passed it, and I passed it with distinction. So you have to take risks at times. Yes, take risks, calculated risks, don't gamble. I knew what I was doing, I wasn't gambling. Now back to the Nietzsche quote. I finished the Kalahari Akrabi's Extreme Marathon every time, when many others who are younger than me, fitter than me, better trained than me don't. And the reason is very simple. I know why it's important for me to finish. They don't. They don't understand their why. Yeah. And as Nietzsche said, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And in the Kalahari at times, there's a lot of pain to bear. And I think that quote is so relevant now in these COVID times. A lot of people who used to go to face-to-face meetings won't use Zoom. Others, even though their shop sales are dwindling or perhaps falling off a cliff, won't have an online presence. And a lot of people won't use social media to promote their business. Those are the hows they cannot bear, which speaks volumes about their why. And it has to be your why, not someone else's or something imposed on you. It has to be powerful, and it has to fulfill an internal need. If your why is wanting expensive things, dig deep and keep digging until you get to the bottom of it. Those of you of a certain age may remember the Janis Joplin song, Mercedes-Benz, and these words, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches, I must make amends." Now, it would have suited my purpose better had she sung, "Oh Lord, I'm going to earn the money to buy a Mercedes-Benz. I must make amends." But it wasn't the Mercedes-Benz that was important. It was making amends that was important. That was her why. Now, you may be thinking that my why that helped me bear all the hows of becoming a chartered accountant, and there were more than I described, did not fulfill an internal need. As I said, I wanted to impress someone's parents. But that's a shorthand way of expressing my why. It was actually about my self-worth and fulfilling my potential. So when setbacks came, I examined that why, dug deep, and found that internal need that drove me on. Now, your whys will change with time, or I think deep down, the fundamental why will always be the same. Now, once I became a partner in a firm of chartered accountants, I'd achieved my objective. I enjoyed being an accountant, it's a great career. However, I needed something else to scratch my achievement itch. Fortunately, completely by accident, I discovered that through running, and I learned more lessons about being unstoppable. In 1999, I ran the 56-mile Comrades Marathon for the first time, so you can perhaps appreciate why the Wisdom's guys think of me as an honorary South African. Now, in a conventional marathon, 26 miles, they say you hit the wall at 18 miles. Now, that doesn't happen in the Comrades Marathon. The wall falls on you about 40 miles. At that point, despite being amongst thousands of people, I was totally alone. Only I could decide whether I lay there crushed or whether I dug myself out and continued to the finish. And that lesson is so empowering. Only you can decide what happens in your life. No one else. Whatever happens, you are in control of how you react to it. Success, failure, or mediocrity is your decision. Now, I've learned a lot from running, and I've learned the most from multi-day events. There are more elements than with a marathon, where you just put one foot in front of the other until you cross the finish line. In a multi-day event, you have to do that as well, but you also need to look after your hydration, your nutrition, your feet, your body, your spirit. When I get into camp at the end of the day, the first thing I do, have a rehydration drink, a little food, fix anything that needs attention, maybe treat a blister, tape a hot spot, ease out an aching muscle, do all that sort of stuff. I do my admin. Then I have my meal, chat to other runners, get myself sorted out for the next day, have a little treat, maybe a favorite food or a hot chocolate, and head a little way out of camp to set my sleeping mat and sleeping bag out in the sand and sleep under the stars. I love that bit, absolutely love that bit. And that's what you need to do after each intense burst pursuing your goals in business. Stop, regroup, check what needs attention, and that includes you and your relationships as well as business matters. Sort yourself out ready for the next burst, rest, and gaze at the stars, at least metaphorically. In a self-sufficient event, you have to carry all your food and at least the mandatory equipment. Any excess in your backpack is not a good thing. Even a small weight carried over 250 kilometers of difficult terrain is significant. So a lot of thought goes into what goes in the pack. If it's not important, it doesn't go in there. And that process is remarkably similar to the Eisenhower matrix described in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Only what is essential goes in the backpack. The same should happen with our time and attention. Stephen Covey notes that too many people spend most of their time dealing with the urgent but not important distractions with deadlines. And the not urgent and not important frivolous distractions. Perhaps checking your Facebook account. And you're not going to be unstoppable with all that on your back. Leave them out of the rucksack. Delegate the first, ditch the second. That will enable you to be Brian Habana-like, carrying the urgent and important over the try line. Now, the first part of Covey's book is about self, about being independent. And the second half is about interdependence, cooperation and collaboration. And that implies in ultra running and multi-day events as well, even though the struggle is an individual one. Kind of lost my train of thought there, but I'll get back onto it. Most of the time I run on my own. I like being on my own. I love being in big bits of nature on my own. It fills my soul. But sometimes I'll run with other people because subconsciously I know I need their help. I help them, they help me, we get to the finish line together. So look for those opportunities to benefit yourself and other people. I think you only learn to spot them subconsciously when you put yourself out of your comfort zone a lot and know yourself really well. So practice being outside of your comfort zone. That can be taken on a physical challenge like Kelvin did with going up the mountain. It might be mixing with different people. It might be public speaking, whatever it is that adds to your fortitude bank. And I've perhaps skipped here to the last chapter in Covey's book where he talks about continuous improvement. In sport, we train, we practice, then we perform. People think that in business, you can perform at the highest level straight away. No, you need to learn, train, and practice before you can excel. The other thing us runners and other sports people do is rest. We rest after training, before big events, and between big events. I once tried completing 3 multi-day events in quick succession one year, and I had to use all my skill and determination to crawl my way to the finish of the last one, the Kalahari Akrabi's Extreme Marathon. The bulldozer spluttered. The engine almost died. And that's why I said earlier, the advice to never stop, never quit, and never give up is wrong. It gives the impression you have to constantly be at it with your pedal to the floor all the time. Rest is important even in business. All successful business people have quality downtime. Almost all do some form of sport, and they spend time with loved ones. The other reason I say never stop, never quit, and never give up is wrong is because of the 663 Ultra I mentioned earlier. It's a continuous 380-mile self-sufficiency race in the Arctic. You have to stop to rest or you'll never finish. Now, I mentioned Mimi Ans and I mentioned my frostbite. Towards the end, Mimi was convinced she couldn't stop or she'd lose her lead, even though she was miles ahead of everyone else. Being tired plays with your mind. Fortunately, she was ordered to stop, otherwise she wouldn't have finished and she wouldn't have won. Even the most amazing person has to rest. Yeah. Now me, I stopped, examined my frostbite, realized it was bad, decided to quit and got taken to hospital because the alternative would have at best been permanent serious damage to my leg. I might have lost it and I could have died. Never stop, never quit, and never give up is not good advice. Never stop, never quit, and never give up until you really, really have to is good advice. Had I quit halfway down that list of banks, I would have never become a chartered accountant. And if you know your why, if you really know your why, you will know when it's appropriate to quit. And that will be very, very rarely. Now, a very practical way to be unstoppable is to have a toolbox. So you can carry out running repairs. And I know that at times when going gets tough, I'm going to struggle. And my mind will come up with all sorts of reasons why I should give up. So I have to come up with loads of reasons why those are just excuses and they're not good enough to allow me to give up. So at the very top of my toolbox is the phrase, you can have excuses or results, you cannot have both. And as you go further down into the toolbox for the more specialist equipment, you'll find that the closer they are connected to your why. So know your why very well. And one of the best tools is a powerful vision of what you want to achieve. For me, that's easy. It's me crossing the race finish line, hugging my friends and having a beer. In business, it might be more complex. However, a compelling vision of where you want to be is the best way of making sure you get there. So when you're building that vision, make it visceral. Use all your senses. What are you seeing, hearing, feeling? What smells are there? What's it taste like? The beer at the end of the 250 kilometers through the desert tastes amazing. That vision has to be real and powerful to pull you towards it and drag you out of sticky patches. To achieve big goals, to be unstoppable, you need to be able to switch views. You need to have the belief that you can complete a 250k challenge. Yet when you're on the start line, and particularly later when you're struggling, you need not to think about it or it'll overwhelm you. You need to focus on the small things you need to do now. And it's the same in business. You need to have a big vision, but you need to do little things every day to get there. Constant forward motion. You need to have unwavering resolve to achieve your vision, but be flexible enough to make changes in how you get there. I've certainly done that with my training for the Kalahari, adapting to a whole variety of curveballs. No two training years have been the same, but never once did I give up on my dream of finishing the Kalahari every year. And one year I couldn't train for 6 months before the event due to a serious back injury. I did what I could to keep Hafe alive. And with 2 weeks to go before the start of the event, I was told I was fit enough to go. That was the backward hold up. I was far from fit. It wasn't pretty, but I finished. Never quit and never give up until you really, really have to is good advice. I hung in there. I didn't quit. I had my flights booked, so I was ready to go when I got the all clear. You need to believe what you're doing is right, but still be open to doing things differently. You can always learn from people. Listen to what people say. Actively listen. Be curious and talk to all sorts of people. Sometimes you can learn more from the warehouse staff or the receptionist than you can from the chief executive. And you never know when something is going to be useful. And that's particularly true now. Things were going well, and then the pandemic came along and changed the rules. So different skills and knowledge are required. If we only know what we need to know now to succeed, we won't succeed when things change. So be curious, actively listen, and you'll be fine. Yeah. The mind is an incredibly powerful thing. And I've got an example, but I'm going to go over time, so I'll save it for later. But our mind is a really powerful way of motivating us, as pushing it through. But it's also a very powerful thing at stopping us. Imagine you're asked to give a speech, something that you're afraid of. You imagine yourself forgetting what to say, getting tongue-tied, making a fool of yourself, etc. So you either don't take the opportunity to give that talk, or if it's something you can't get out of, it turns out just as you imagined. Had you imagined being confident, the audience smiling and thinking you were great, that was how it would have turned out. And there's a big lesson for being unstoppable. Don't stop yourself. Don't let negative thoughts be a roadblock. And finally, vision is about knowing what matters. One practical exercise I suggest is going for a walk in a graveyard. I find them uplifting places. They're full of love. Read the headstones, and I can guarantee you that not one says, "Here lies the best marketing manager," or "Here lies a much missed salesman," or "a dear departed chief executive." They will all say, "Here lies a much missed father, a dear husband, a beautiful daughter." So consider what is important. So those are my thoughts, and I'm just going to summarize the key points before we get to question time. Clear out the drains. Keep trying and don't rule any options out. Take risks, calculated risks, but don't gamble. Know your why, really know your why. You're in control of how you react to events. Failure, success, or mediocrity is your decision. Keep your rucksack light, practice, rest, have a toolbox, have a powerful vision, help and be helped. Actively listen and be curious. Don't stop yourself. Visit a graveyard. Oh, and I almost forgot, there's one universal truth about being unstoppable. You have to start. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions, and I hope you found that useful.